Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm ffinlo Costain. New and important analysis by the Global Alliance for the Future of Food and Dahlberg Advisors finds that food production, transport and storage account for at least 15% of fossil fuels used annually. This report is the first time that researchers have focused on fossil fuels rather than simply emissions and have estimated their global use across the entire food supply chain. Fong is Programme Director for Climate Health and Wellbeing at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. I asked her why she chose to focus this report on fossil fuels and fossil fuel-dependent food systems.
Thanks, ffinlo. So you might have seen that, maybe it was last week, there's new analysis that came out from climate scientists that said that we have just 6 years left if we want a 50-50 chance of maintaining global warming to below 1.5 degrees centigrade. And this means that we urgently need a global agreement to phase out of fossil fuels. It is one of the major drivers of greenhouse gas emissions. And so there was a call to phase out of fossil fuels last year, about a year ago at COP27, which did not succeed. And the United Arab Emirates, which is the host of this year's COP, is a petrostate and was one of the countries that opposed the language to call out for phasing out of fossil fuels. This year, they have pledged to raise food systems transformation as one of their priorities, alongside tripling the amount of renewable energy. And so while we support the prioritization of food systems at the UN Climate Conference, we believe this cannot come at the expense of a fossil fuel phase out. In fact, true transformation must address fossil fuels, including petrochemical expansion into agrochemicals and plastics, as well as the overall energy intensity of industrial food systems and renewable energy access for developing countries.
It's always struck me that an emissions focus has advantaged technical fixes and fossil fuel dependent farming systems. So do you think that by taking this approach, you'll be able to call out those more industrialized models within food systems and elevate the importance of agroecological models instead?
It is one of the angles to help look at how food systems are contributing and impacted by climate change. It is not the only way. So fossil fuels indeed, but there's also other sources of emissions such as methane and nitrous oxides. And so things that are not fully captured by just a focus on fossil fuels. So we don't want to deflect from that. Actually, we need all of it to happen together. But I think this is a new angle to help understand, well, if you're actually trying to reduce energy consumption, increase renewable energy access, how do you frame it in a way that you're also thinking about the impacts of food systems so that actually we can benefit and provide multiple outcomes, multiple synergies?
So who's the report actually targeted at, and essentially who needs to be mobilized to drive the transformation in food systems that you believe humanity requires?
So we had two audiences in mind when we first commissioned this report. One is really aimed at the climate community who are engaged at the COP processes this year. So this is why we launched last week, just ahead of COP. So both the negotiators as well as climate advocates who are advocating for a fossil fuel phase out and a clean energy transition, and really calling for an integrated approach because we do have common goals. A second audience we had in mind is the philanthropic community. So for too long, grant making strategies have been siloed around energy and food and land use. And it doesn't need to be this way. So if we can actually work together, we can be much more effective in reducing unintended consequences, such as, for example, around bioenergy and biofuels, biogas, by collaborating together. And so we actually have accompanying a more detailed discussion paper in which we go into more detail on some of the tensions and need of dialogue, so how can we bring food and energy communities together, but also the near-term high-impact opportunities in which actually, if we actually work together, we can actually have a much more powerful force.
Energy is a key focus for the report, including the phenomenal energy requirement of lab-produced proteins. So how do we transition to a low-energy, zero-carbon food system?
So indeed, reducing excess meat consumption is amongst the best ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But as you point out, highly processed meat substitutes can be very energy intensive to produce. So besides supporting the food environments that promote both plant-rich diets and minimally processed foods, we recommend a number of other ways to reduce the use of fossil fuels in the food system. So, for example, phasing out the use of fossil fuel-based agrochemicals and instead investing in sustainable farming practices such as agroecology and regenerative agriculture, shifting to renewable energy for food processing and transport, and reassessing subsidies that go towards biogas and biofuel producers.
Now, you mentioned philanthropic organizations earlier on, but how do you think the financing of food systems needs to change to support the transition that you're looking for?
So this report doesn't go into detail on the financing, but we did produce one about a year ago ahead of COP27, in which we found that even though food systems contribute to a third, so 33% of greenhouse gas emissions, only 3% of climate financing actually goes to food system. So one is we need to drastically increase the amount of financing that goes to food. And if funders, all types from public, private, philanthropic funders, consider the right set of indicators at the outset of designing a program so that programs to reduce energy use and increase renewable energy access not only tackle greenhouse gas emissions, but also improve health and nutrition, safeguard livelihoods, and improve food security.
Sorry, Patty, go on.
Oh, and then just one more thing. So it's not only the amount of finance, but it's the type of finance that needs to shift. So more finance needs to go directly to benefiting smallholder and family farmers, which produce the majority of food. In the world, and they currently just receive just a tiny fraction of the climate financing that is available.
And just finally, Patty, do you think that we can achieve all this in time to avert calamity? And can we deliver it while also ensuring global access to quality nutrition?
Well, we don't have a choice, really. Climate change is already impacting the yield and nutritional quality of the food that's being produced. We need to start to incentivize and really accelerate the production of more diverse, traditional, and indigenous varieties for direct consumption in order to build resilience for local communities and safeguard indigenous knowledge and cultures, rather than the crops that are currently being incentivized, that are energy intensive, used for highly refined sugars and fats, and then used for producing ultra-processed foods or as feed for industrial livestock production. And just finally, agroecology and regenerative agriculture are actually some of the best ways to improve access to nutritious foods and boost farmer incomes at the same time. Early this year, we supported a comprehensive study of community managed natural farming in India, which showed that farmers practicing agroecology increased their yields by 11%. And because of these practices, they didn't need to rely on costly external inputs such as chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and their incomes actually increased by an average of 49%.
That was Patty Fong from the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. More news on our website, 8point9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.